Good evening. This February the 6th Board of Aldermen meeting is hereby called to order. I'm going to ask Alderwoman Hamilton to lead us in our prayer, and I'll follow up by the Pledge of Allegiance. Leading that, please stand.
Please join me in prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we give you the thanks today for a beautiful day. Dear Father, we thank you for giving us the opportunity to gather tonight to do the business of the city. Dear Lord, we're reminded of your words in Proverbs where you say to guide us in the way of wisdom. Dear Father, we're asking you tonight to guide us in the way of wisdom as we make these decisions. Guide our mayor as he leads us. This we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Be seated. Ms. Stewart, would you conduct a roll call?
Aldridge. Here. Collins.
Here.
Dickerson.
Here.
Earhart. Hamilton.
Here.
Henderson.
Here.
Wallace.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. All present except Alderman Earhart. We do have a quorum. Welcome to this meeting. This is also known as Ronald Reagan Day. Mississippi and 25 other states celebrate Ronald Reagan's birthday, and this is known as Ronald Reagan Day in our state. Board, you have before you the minutes from our January the 16th regular call meeting. You've had those a couple of days. Any questions on those minutes, or do you have any motions? Any questions or motions?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Mr. Dickerson. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Hamilton. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. I'll try to remember as well myself, but I do ask board members and staff with microphones to please make sure the mic's on as you're speaking. Remind everybody that we are streaming live on YouTube, so we want to make sure that people that can hear not only inside this courtroom but also online as well. Following the agenda, the Mayor's Award will be next. One of my favorite, am I on? Yes, sir. Thank you. One of my favorite parts of the job is the Mayor's Award that it's my privilege to give out every month. And with this announcement, I will call my friend, Claudette, our Assistant Finance Director, call her to the front. And this is Miss Claudette Rice, and you'll never see her without a smile on her face, I assure you. A real good write-up this month, and it didn't even come from her department. It came from COO Andra. It's submitted by Todd. I'd like to nominate Claudette Rice for this month's Mayor's Award. In late 2023, Claudette accepted the challenge to complete the airport's month-end reports. Claudette graciously accepted this assignment, filling this need for a team member who has been out of the office and on leave, extended leave. Claudette completed this time-consuming task that required her to put together several detailed reports and learn a new software system specific to the airport. Claudette has done an excellent job completing this assignment while maintaining her regular job responsibilities. This is indicative of the positive can-do attitude that Claudette consistently displays. Thanks to Claudette for her extra efforts and for continuing to make a positive difference. Thank you, Claudette. You don't want to leave. This is the most important part. This is $250 cash. And I always remind, no tax dollars used for this. This is individual sponsors and donors and businesses that want to join us in congratulating our employees for going above and beyond. So congratulations. We'll look at Jen. Next is mayor's updates for the board. Board, you have a pretty lengthy document. I'm not going to read all of these, but there's a couple things that I want to point out, things that have been taking place in our operation within the city. Inclement weather, we all know what that looked like. We're all a part of that. Top of the mind with that is we had no team member injuries, and that is very key when you have public safety individuals, first responders going out to help during the inclement weather that we had. Having no injuries is rule number one, to take care of yourself so you can take care of the people. But I gave you a rundown on the things that were done to deal with the inclement weather, the snow and ice that week. You got equipment used. You see the sand trucks, salt trucks, great blades, snow plow, traffic control, on and on and on. Materials used, 50 tons of sand, 8 tons of salt. Labor, just for the street department only, they went to 12-hour shifts, worked around the clock, 2,304 hours of worked, and 1,024 was overtime. Natural gas department went to 12-hour shifts as well. You see the type calls they had, 5-day span. They worked roughly 648 human resource hours, and 368, about half of that was overtime. Wastewater, some similar type numbers, meeting needs, 12-hour shifts were implemented, and that included 7 days a week. Turn off meters due to leaks in homes. Some people don't know how to turn their water meter off, or don't have the right tool, so it's important that they get there as quick as they can to stop water from flowing in a person's home. You see the new pump installed, et cetera. 1,320 staff hours used for that. But what's normally asked of us is, why can't you clean every street in the city? And that's a valid question. People want their streets cleaned, and I understand that. But the other side of it is twofold. One, if we cleaned every street in this city, as soon as a vehicle got to another jurisdiction, whether that's another city or the county or across the state line, guess what? They would hit snow and ice on those roads as well. Sometimes people would say, well, you're not scraping close enough to your streets to get all the ice off. I learned, y'all might have known, but that's not the goal of the snowplow. The snowplow is to get the snow out of the way and compact it smaller so that vehicles can go over it without hitting it and getting stuck. And once a sheet of ice, maybe 1/8 of an inch thick, forms on our roads or streets, you can't get that up with a blade. You can only get it up with salt. And salt, if I understand right, Mr. Fessmeyer, stops working at 15 degrees. So once it's colder than 15 degrees, the salt doesn't do you any good. Fortunately, we didn't have a situation like one of our counterparts had at an unnamed area south of here. The men and the women in the community decided they would take their tractors and box blades and they would help that area clean up their streets and highways, and they did so much damage to the roadways that local area not quite sure how they're ever going to fund repairing the streets, because they damaged a lot of streets out with good intentions with their own tractors and equipment and blades, and damaged their streets terribly. But what would be needed if we cleaned all the streets? You can look at it. 4 trucks, $80,000 to $100,000 each, 4 sand spreaders, $21,000 worth of salt. And guess what? You can't store salt out in the weather, so now you've got to build housing for that salt. So now you're talking another $45,000 to build the salt. And then you're talking about added overtime hours. Grand total, about $509,000 in capital and $116,000 a year if we had the goal of salting every street inside the city limits of Olive Branch. And we would be spending that money for normally what would be 2 days a year, maybe 3 days a year. So not the smartest spend. It really isn't when it comes to that. We're fortunate that we don't have a lot of severe weather, but that kind of spend just for a couple days a week is, a couple days a year is just really not practical. You see the fire department calls, 1,344 overtime hours, 93 responses to scenes for the fire department, 113 EMS calls during that week. Dispatchers, as well as all the first public service staff, reported on time without any issues getting to work. Police department they worked 24 motor vehicle crashes, 60 motor assist, and 17 traffic control situations there. You see HR as far as their stats this month that they've dealt with, from street lights to purchasing orders to candidates and testing. We did implement our inaugural Wesson House dinner this past weekend, and thank you, Alderwoman Hamilton, for working that. Jen as well, Jen Griffith, and probably some others in here. This Wesson House is gorgeous. It is a museum, but it's not something that we can't open up to the public, and we did. We drew a family's name. They were all here, people were here for the Christmas tree lighting, and they submitted their name to be drawn for the dinner at the Wesson House. So we had that, we drew the name, had the dinner. We're thankful for 2 crazy fellows. They agreed to cater it at no cost. Committee members for the Wesson House, Kim Terrell, Alderwoman Hamilton, Dina Richardson staffed it, and that family got to enjoy what sure looked like a great meal. It looks like they had a really good time doing it. Ms. Hamilton, anything else to add to that? You were part of it.
For the first time for us to do an event, it could have not have been any worked out any better or flowed any better. And I will have to give a big hand clap to Jennifer Griffith, because she had the dining room all decorated in the Mardi Gras, which the parade is coming up. She had it all decorated, and two crazy fellas did an awesome job. It was a 4-course meal, and it flowed, and the people really enjoyed it enough. They asked a lot of questions about the history, about the house, about the city. Anyway, it was an amazing time. We all enjoyed it. Looking forward to doing it again.
Good. I am too. I think that's a great opportunity for the public and for us to show the home off of the first mayor of Olive Branch, the Wesson House. Chief Operating Officer updates, you see those. General Services, they completed 182 building inspections in January and issued 146 permits. Public Works, I'm not going to repeat some of the things they did during the inclement weather, but they were truly working around the clock, and people were cooking for them. Some of the employees were cooking for them. The other employees are out in the cold, coming back in. We've had a number of businesses, church as well, step up and thank Public Works for what they did and for keeping things running. They sent food there, brought food to the Public Works building, and tried to show those men and women they appreciated what they did. Sanitation, streets department, you see those things that took place. 56 water leak repairs from the water sewer department, repairs on 34 lift stations, 6 damaged water lines, 3 water mains, 27 water plant maintenance issues, 13 water plant alarm notifications. So they were pretty busy, those men and women, all month. Gas department did 1,459 locates, meaning they went out to somebody's property and marked lines for where gas is running, water may be running, mainly gas, and did that for 1,459 homes or businesses in our city just in 1 month. That doesn't include the locates that utilities do, that a private provider like North Central or AT&T or C-Spire. So a lot of locates take place in order for people to build, do landscaping in their yard, et cetera, to make sure they're doing it safely. Engineering has an update for you on things they're working on with animal shelter, Public Works building, parks as well. IT updates from them as well on things that they have upgraded at internet service at our fire stations and new fire admin building. Fleet maintenance, things that they took care of as well that were needed, had to be had. Fleet maintenance, they were an essential group because Public Works was working, police and fire, so therefore vehicles needed working on, and things had to be done to keep them alive and well, and fleet maintenance did that. Planning department, you see the things that they have active. A lot of applications being worked. We probably do more in 2 months than most cities do all year long of smaller size. Code enforcement dealt with 268 cases last month. GIS implemented our golf cart applications so the citizens would know where they can drive their golf cart once they meet the regulations and get a sticker on their golf cart. Parks and Recs, youth softball, baseball registration has began. Coaches meeting has already been held, and a few other things there as well. I have a master project list for you. That's the document that's color-coded. Mr. Andre and his team put this together. These are key projects that are being worked on that the board has either approved in some form or fashion for us to work on, or you'll see them in the near future. This is not all the projects. These are the projects that planning and engineering and Public Works are involved in. Other individual projects like IT, police department projects, fire department projects may not be listed on here. But if you look at the last point of my handout for the mayor's updates, if you see some things that are not on this list that you think should be, please make sure, board, that I know that so we can get to working to see if funding is there for it, or if not, how we're going to work it in next year, that kind of thing. So if you see some things that we need to be doing that are not here, please let me know. And very last, OBPD events for January are listed, and the February events as well, including the upcoming Mardi Gras parade this Saturday at 1 p.m. Jen, is 1 p.m., is it 1 p.m. Saturday?
Live music, food trucks, and kid activities will start at 11 a.m. on the grounds of the Weston House,
Okay.
with the parade to start at 1 p.m.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions on the mayor's updates? Next item, sir. Consent agenda, you have as well before you. Any questions on consent agenda items that are before you? Hearing none, any motions? Motion to approve by Ms. Henderson. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Wallace. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda approved as is. Next item, public hearing, which is old business, a public hearing for consideration of application to appeal the Board of Adjustments December the 14th, 2023 denial of a variance request submitted by property owners Samuel and Orlando Parker for an accessory building to encroach 15 feet into the 50-foot front yard setback along Camptown Lane. The 1.09 plus or minus acre subject lot is zoned AR, Agricultural Residential District, and is located at the northeast corner of Westbrook Drive and Camptown Lane, known as 8340 Westbrook Drive. Is there a staff report, Mr. Gambone?
Yes, sir. Start off with the location of the subject property, its general location. We're sitting right about here in the municipal court building. If you drove up 305 and you made a left on either Windersgate Drive or Collinswood Drive, you would go up into this intersection right here, which is Westbrook Drive, and make a left. And we're there at the corner of Camptown Lane and Westbrook Drive. The address of the subject property is 8340 Westbrook Drive, and it's Lot 16 of the Germanwood Station subdivision. This just shows you a close-up of the subject property. There's a vacant lot to the north of this lot in question, but otherwise we're in really a developed neighborhood. When you go into tax records, it appears that most of the homes in Germanwood Station and some of the surrounding subdivisions were built 20 years ago, more or less. The appellants tonight are Orlando and Samuel Parker, as you mentioned. They're the property owners who are building the new home that you can see pictured on this lot, which is 1.09 acres, as you mentioned, and it's a corner lot. And what that means is that for the purposes of setbacks and applying setbacks, it has two front yards. And so you can see the black line that's shown shows the 50-foot setback required in the AR district from Camptown Lane and 50 feet from Westbrook Drive. And so you can see that the home itself, the home structure, is located outside of those setback zones, but the accessory building that was constructed encroaches about 15 feet into that 50-foot front setback line along Camptown. So to legally place any type of structure within a setback, a variance is required, and it's our Board of Zoning Adjustment that hears those variance cases on a monthly basis. So this just shows you a ground level view of the accessory building in question. It is a 1,200 square foot building. It's 30 feet north to south and runs 40 feet east to west. And again, it encroaches about 15 feet into that setback line, which is depicted right here. And I would note that the pavement of Camptown Lane is within the right-of-way. So if you actually measure, there's a grass strip between the edge of pavement and where the right-of-way ends and the property line starts. So really, the front of this building is probably about 45 feet or so from the edge of pavement of Camptown Lane. It's situated 15 feet from the north or rear property line, so that's not any type of issue. The building is 19 feet in height, and our code allows a maximum of 20 feet. And the 1,200 square foot building is 29% of the floor area of the principal structure, which again is just over 4,000 square feet in size. So our code allows you to go to 50 of the size of your principal structure in terms of your accessory buildings. The building is metal, which is a permissible building for accessory structures in the city. So I say all this to point out that the only issue that was before our Board of Adjustment was the 15-foot setback along Camptown Lane. Every other aspect of the building was legal and conforming to the city's zoning code requirements. So you can see the accessory building used for is to be used for vehicular storage, and it's pretty much aligned with the driveway. This picture is about a month or so old. Since that time, the Parkers have poured the driveway up to where their garage doors are, and that picture is taken from straight across the street due north, so you can see the garage doors face this way, and that's what's shown on the picture here. Construction was stopped on the building. Upon its completion, it would have a concrete floor. It would have garage doors. The applicants have purchased 4 windows to be installed in the building, and they're also planning to put a brick wainscoting along the lower 4 feet or so of the property along this southern elevation of the building. And this just shows you some pictures moving up northward on Camptown Lane. One thing that's important to point out is there is along this Camptown Lane right-of-way, there is a 5-foot high berm that's partially vegetated, and you can see it in the photo here. And as we go a little bit farther to the north and look back toward the southeast, you'll see the vegetation's a little bit thicker, and there's some evergreens, and the foliage is missing on some of the trees here. Again, the picture was just taken about a month ago. The area of most concern when this item came before the Board of Adjustment from the public was the north elevation of the building. And you've got, again, this 40-foot side of the building, and it's visible as you're driving southward on Camptown Lane. Now, this photo was taken on the adjoining property, which is vacant, looking at it, due to the south. But again, that's the area that's most obtrusive, and probably the issue that kept coming up repeatedly is that's really the elevation that people were concerned about. So to address this without a variance, you would need to move this building 15 feet eastward out of that 50-foot front setback, and so you can see what it would look like over here. Pushing it over about 15 feet. Now, I think one of the key points is it would probably still be likely if you were traveling south on Camptown Lane, even with it moved 15 feet over outside the setback. And it's a structure that would be very costly to move. This is a picture taken from the back, and you can see inside that second bay door. And I want you to note the type of construction that we have here. This is a pole barn, so it's on about 18 posts that are cemented into the ground, and then the barn panels are affixed to it. So in order to disassemble or to move it, it's not like it's on skids or something. You could move it with the truck. You'd basically have to take the entire thing apart. You have roof trusses up here, which aren't shown on the picture. They maybe could be reused in a new location, but it would be something that would be difficult to do and costly, and you could possibly even damage that building when you were moving it from one spot to another. And there's also an additional issue of electrical service. We have the transformer box that's located out here, and the power was run along the north property line in the back of the building, and then over here to the meter, electrical meter, which is on the house. So we did get an estimate from North Central just to move the electric alone would be about a $2,600 expense to be able to do that. And again, if you were to move the building back in this direction to the east, you would have to uninstall the electric and reinstall it again. So as far as history or how we got here, the construction timeline, the permit for the single-family home was issued back in May of this year, or last year, and that home was already under construction when an application was submitted for the accessory building. And this is the actual plan that came in with that permit. Unfortunately, when it was submitted, we had a technician in our building department that did not recognize that this was a corner lot. They assumed when this was stamped as approved, they thought it was an interior lot and didn't recognize that there was a requirement for a 50-foot setback along Camptown Lane. And so we had a permit that was erroneously issued for this building on September 18th of 2023, and that's when after, maybe a week or two afterwards, was when, upon receiving some complaints, an inspector went out and determined that it was in the setback area and work was stopped once that location problem was assessed. So subsequent to that, to remedy the situation, the applicant filed a variance request that went to our Board of Adjustment, and they filed that on October 13th, and that was originally scheduled for our November Board of Adjustment meeting, which unfortunately again got canceled because we had a power outage in this room, and so the item, along with all of the other items that were on the docket for that night, got moved to December 14th, and that's when the public hearing was held. Now, prior to the Board of Adjustment meetings, the staff sends out a courtesy notice. It's not something that's required by law, but something that we send out as a courtesy to everyone within 500 feet of the subject property, letting them know of this variance request. And there was a petition that was received from property owners of 37 different properties in the 59-lot Germanwood Station subdivision. And then during the December 14th meeting, we had 6 residents who did speak at the podium in opposition to the variance as well. So we'll go into the variance criteria. So when our Board of Adjustment hears a variance, the first question they have to ask is there a hardship? And that hardship can't just be financial, it really has to involve other factors, and they use 4 criteria to determine whether or not a variance should be issued. So the first criteria deals with, are there special conditions or circumstances that are unique due to the shape, size, location, or topography of a lot or parcel or structure thereon, which are not ordinarily or generally found in the same zoning district. So our planning staff presented this during the public hearing to our Board of Adjustment. It's the picture that you see on the right, and this is an assessment of the backyard areas of all of the homes that are on that block. So you can see our subject properties here showing a 15,543 square foot backyard area and usable backyard area when you apply all of the setback standards and where the house is located, and then that's compared to all of the other ones in the neighborhood, and it's substantially smaller than all of the other ones there. The closest one is also a corner lot, which is showing a backyard area of 18,160, and that's actually, this is 14% smaller than that lot. So you can see that we do have a difference among all of those lots. Now, normally when you design a subdivision, what you do on the corner lots is usually take account for the 2 setbacks, so you widen out the lot or make it a little bit deeper, and that was not done with the design of this particular subdivision. So all of the lots have the same dimensions, so that's why essentially you end up with that smaller backyard area on the subject property. Now furthermore, it's kind of hard to see on this slide, but these are all 1-foot contour lines. So what you have on the east side of this property is you have a pretty severe slope. It drops 5 to 10 feet. There's a ditch that runs through here. The water converges down here underneath these tree canopies. And so again, you could argue that even less of the area was usable in the backyard based upon this topographical condition. So the staff was of the opinion that this did in fact meet this hardship criteria that would justify a variance being issued. So as far as criteria number 2 deals with, are there special conditions or circumstances that do not result from the actions of the applicant? Now obviously the Parkers did not design the lot or the subdivision. That was done in 2004, so they were not the ones who created, this is not a self-imposed type of variance condition, and in fact, the Parkers, it could be said, acted in very good faith here because they did properly obtain the permit for the accessory building. This is not a circumstance where they did something knowingly wrong and then are trying to ask for forgiveness. They did everything by the book and correctly, so they have acted in good faith. Number 3 deals with literally interpreting the provisions of the ordinance and depriving the applicant of rights that are commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zone or district. And we do have a situation where we have large accessory buildings are very common in the AR zone, and actually in this neighborhood there's even some metal buildings. So you could certainly argue that if we were to literally interpret the 50-foot setback and require that building be moved 15 feet at great expense, it could be depriving the applicant full use of what we have, a very limited backyard area that's available to them. And this just shows some pictures of large accessory buildings that are across the street from the subject property on both sides. This is across Westbrook Drive, and then this one is across Camptown Lane, and you can see those structures. So finally, would this variance confer any type of special privilege on the applicant that would be denied to others? And I think under similar circumstances, other variances have been granted to people in the city when we've had this type of situation. In fact, we'd even made some changes to our code in 2019 that allowed people the ability, if they had gotten a variance for a fence along the two front setbacks, to put a 6-foot fence in, like what you would consider a side front yard, that we do allow them outright to put a shed behind that fence, as long as it doesn't exceed certain size criteria in terms of the square footage and the height. So when this got to our Board of Zoning Adjustment, the staff did recommend approval, subject to the condition of the applicant planning an evergreen screening along that northern elevation, the one that's most visible along Camptown Lane. And that motion to approve did fail on a 3-3 tie vote. And I think it's safe to say that the maker of that motion emphasized that moving the building would really have very minimal impact and not really address the concerns that the neighbors had of that visible north elevation. Moving it 15 feet really wasn't going to make a big difference there. And there was an alternative motion that was presented to our Board of Adjustment that, finding that the variance criteria were not met and that the garage could be moved out of the front setback, to deny. And so that motion to deny did pass on a 4-2 vote. And the maker of the motion in this case did emphasize that there was a need to maintain minimum and consistent setback along Camptown Lane for the purpose of neighborhood character. And so let me show this again. This is showing the 50-foot front setback lines along the street, and you can see that there's really nothing in those setback zones except for this small area of this accessory building. You do have 4 available alternatives tonight. Number 1, you could simply affirm the decision of the Board of Adjustment and essentially deny the variance request, affirming what the Board of Adjustment did at their December meeting. You could reverse the decision of the Board of Adjustment following the initial staff recommendation that was provided. You could, number 3, you could remand the case back to the Board of Adjustment and ask them to reconsider their determination based on any new evidence or things that may come out in tonight's meeting. Number 4, you could modify the decision of the Board of Adjustment, reversing it and adding any conditions you wanted to with respect to the building. Things like you could add them to add additional brick or windows, painting, etc., or any type of landscaping. And so the staff has provided a recommended motion to do just that, to modify it, and the staff is recommending that you would reverse the decision of the board, again finding that a hardship exists, namely the unique small size of the usable rear and side areas of the property relative to other lots in the vicinity, finding that those other variance criteria were met, and approve the 15-foot front yard setback variance to allow the 1,200 square foot building to be located 35 feet from the front property line of Camptown Lane, subject to 2 conditions. Number 1, that the applicant would plant a minimum of 7 5-gallon Nellie Stephen Holly bushes evenly spaced on center along the north side of the accessory building, about 7.5 feet from the building wall within that 15-foot strip that's available, and that those plantings would be done by March 31st. And so this shows you on the left-hand side what that might look like at the time of planting. A 5-gallon plant to Nellie Stevens Holly is probably going to be about 4 or 5 feet at the time of planting, and that shows how they would be spaced out and visible behind the berm, and that they would be watered in and grown to a mature 15-foot height to provide the full evergreen screening. So in about 3-4 years, If they're allowed to grow, it might look something like that you see on the right. That would pretty much provide a full screen of the north face of the building that seemed to be the major concern of the surrounding residents. And then number two, that the applicant would install 1 to 2 of the 4 windows that they've already purchased along the west elevation of the property to break that facade up a little bit, and this gives you an idea of what moving at least one of those windows over there would look like. And that concludes the staff presentation. Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gambone. Before we get started, the Parkers, are they here? And anyone else from the subdivision here as well? On behalf of the city, I extend our apology. We made a mistake. We own that mistake. We approved it, and we've learned from this mistake and have tweaked it going forward. It's not the way we like to welcome our new guests to the city that build a home. So my regrets that you had to go through this, and we have fixed it where hopefully it doesn't happen again. So my apologies. Does the board have any questions about the staff report before we take public comments? When you come forward to comment, there are some blue cards on the table between me and the first row. If you will complete that card after you get through speaking and give it to the clerk to my right, your left, and we just need your name and address so we can have it for the minutes of this particular hearing. If you are here to speak on behalf of this applicant's request, we'd like for you to come forward at this time. And if there's an applicant have anything to add before people come forward, it's pretty well summarized, I believe, but you're welcome to. Okay. Anybody that wants to speak on behalf of this applicant, you're in agreement with this to allow it to stand, or asking the board to leave this pretty much as is, come forward at this time if you'd like to make those public comments. And if you will, when you begin, give us your name and address.
Harvey Madden, 8327 King Crossing.
Yes, your comments?
Huh?
We're ready for your comments.
Okay, then. I feel that the building needs to stand where it's at because there's nothing really wrong with the building. And you go ahead and put the trees behind the building, hide the building, it'll be okay. So, ain't nothing wrong with the building. So I feel the building should stand like it is.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right.
If you'll complete one of those cards back there on the table and give that to the clerk. Anyone else would like to speak on behalf of this applicant? You are in favor of the building staying as is.
Good evening, everyone. Michael Chandler, 8312 Mellon Drive, Olive Branch. I probably wasn't going to speak, but I saw, since I was on the staff report as being one of the 6 who originally objected to this, I thought I'd make my public comments of saying that after studying and learning some of the situations of it being an AR house, being a corner with 2 front lots, some of the situations that went into building it, I personally would not have my objection to this standing as is. So I just wanted to rise and say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. Anyone else to speak on behalf of the applicant or the application?
Yes, I'm at 8074 Camptown Lane, and as I look out of my front door to side, I'm looking directly into this large metal structure.
Could we get your name, ma'am?
It's Ruby Tucker.
Okay, got that, Mr. Clerk. Okay.
8074 Camptown Lane, and as I pass it, there's no other structure this large in our neighborhood, and it's really an eyesore. My recommendation shouldn't be based on financial, even though you say that it is a mistake of the city. It's just don't fit in a residential neighborhood. My family have a farm that is considered as a barn. My brother has this same type of structure on his property. He uses it to store his lawn equipment and hay for his cattle. So it's just not a structure that I feel and some of the other neighbors feel that it should be in a neighborhood. If it's moved over, then that would conceal some of it. I understand you say that you're going to by some bushes or whatever, but it's not gonna hide the whole complete building because it is a very, very large structure and it's an eyesore in the neighborhood. And I would recommend that it be moved over 50 feet or whatever the recommendation is. At least that would take some of that, the left side of the building from my eyesight and for anyone that's moving into the coming into the neighborhood.
Thank you. Anyone else? Now I'm taking people that are speaking on behalf, you're speaking for it, you're for it, you're a proponent of it. Anyone else to speak on behalf of this applicant? You wish to let the building stand as is, come forward. Now, anyone that's in opposition, you want to speak in opposition to this building and let the board know your thoughts on that, come forward.
Good evening. My name is Joyce Echoes, and I've lived in this subdivision for 22 years, and I live across the street from this building. And it's kind of interesting to hear, the presentation. This is what I'm looking at out of my front door when I walk out of my front door. I live directly across the street from the vacant lot. And my house sits on a hill, so this berm doesn't do anything for me. The evergreen trees that were pictured, on the screen look like big trees. It's just two little volunteer cedar bushes. It's not covering anything. So, I mean, in my estimation, if their lot would not accommodate a building of this size, they shouldn't have got a building this size. If it doesn't fit, they want a gigantic structure, and it doesn't really fit the lot because it's not like the ditch just got there. The ditch was already there. So there were limitations on this lot in the beginning. So to go and put a gigantic building where it doesn't fit, I don't see why we should make exceptions for this building. I mean, if I wanted to go and get a building this size, sit it in my front yard, I don't think I'd get approved for it because I know better. It's too big. So I live at 8017 Camptown Lane, and I definitely oppose this.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, please do one of the comment cards, ma'am, if you will, the blue cards on the table. Anyone else to speak in opposition of this building, in opposition of the building? Anyone else to speak for or against either one? Does the board have any questions of staff?
I'm sorry?
50% of the size of the house.
And that's for probably a 4,000 square foot house?
Yes, sir. They're 29% of the size of the house,
So
so
you
they're
could
well
actually-
within the standard
So
in the
it could
code.
have actually been a larger garage.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
He could have had almost double the size, or he and she could have had almost double the size. It's just the location that it's 15 feet too close to the street.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from the board? Final call for or against anyone in the audience to speak for or against this application. Okay. Hearing none, we'll close the comment sections completely out. Okay. 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 Would the applicant come forward, please?
Good evening.
Hey, how you doing?
All right, and you?
Yeah, I'm Alderman Collins. My question is the problem I have with it is I understand it's encroachment and all that, but it's the look of the building. Why wouldn't you have built it to look like your house?
honestly, I mean, I'm like that lady, everybody on that whole thing would be going right by it. Yeah, I'd be more susceptible to voting for it if you would brick it and make it look like your house, you know, and rather than, I understand it's the money probably deal, you know, while you're trying to make it metal, right?
Well, actually, this is what I try to tell people, and I try to be as honest as possible. When it comes down to choosing things, even choosing a house and the design of the house, a lot of stuff comes down to personal preference. And being a soldier and somebody that works for the government, always been a government, freedom of choosing what we always wanted to choose is something that I've always fought for. And when we picked the building was picked actually to match the house. That's why it's the color the way that it is. That's why we're putting the bricks across the front, and we're putting windows into the front of the building that matches the house. Actually, they're the exact same windows that match the house, not windows that you would normally find in a building of that type. So actually, this is a building and the preference of what I personally like and felt like that we wanted to build our dream home.
Is it going, so you gonna brick that, you gonna brick this
No,
building?
we're doing the wainscoting around the front of around the front of it. We're not
Well-
bricking the whole building.
That may help to look to the front, but the sides and the back, everybody on the streets going up and down through there. And I understand, we talked about landscaping, but it'd be a long time before the landscaping would be enough to cover the building. Yeah, I just wondering if y'all would agree, or is it too much money to brick the whole thing and make it look like your house, or not? I mean,
To do the wainscoting around the bottom, just a little bit under the brown that you see is basically $3,500, and that's not including the price of the bricks or including the rest of the mortar and the labor. That's just the price to do the bricks across the front. So that's something that I already had planned to do and was gonna do anyway. And one of the things that people are looking at, and like was brought up, we acted in good faith. And one of the other things is, before I even applied for the permit, the building inspector that inspected the house, we actually stood in the center of the place, and it was staked out before I even applied for the permit. So I did everything I could do up front. I looked at your website, and the website didn't even address the corners, lots. And with all that being said, if the building is setting over 15 feet, we're not even having this conversation. At that point, before I put the building up, if I went and got the permit and they said that that's within the 50-foot setback, I would have moved the building over 15 feet.
yeah, I understand that.
And the building would have still been over 15 feet, and we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Well, yeah, I understand that, and I understand the corner lot and stuff, but everybody else in your subdivision has I know we issued your permit, or the building department did, but everybody else in the subdivision has, you know, complied with the building setbacks. And
we would
I'm
have
just
also
worried
said-
about the street. Now, it's just out in your house, but everybody along that street.
You don't have to say it. I understand you comply with what we asked you to do. We
Yeah,
approved
I
your
mean,
plan. I see
I mean,
you
it's a
saw.
hard
And
situation.
can I say one other thing? Everybody talk about the 50-foot setback, but we're the only property besides the other property behind us that has a berm that runs along in our setback. So it is something else in the setback that also goes against what everybody else doesn't have in their property. So the berm actually starts on my property. It's not across the street. If he pulls a picture back up of the whole subdivision, you will see that this berm actually runs and starts, and the whole property was actually elevated and flat up to the top of the berm. And dirt was actually cut and moved from the berm over to the rest of the lot to elevate it and make it level so that we could build a house. So where you see if you go back to the previous picture, so if you see the base of the berm, that's how low that has actually been cut down for the builder to actually sit there and to get the dirt to actually level the rest of the property. That's how uneven the whole spot was. And within the berm is the utilities of the property. So even on the plat map, the utilities show that they're 10 feet from the road, but they're actually right there on the berm beside the building.
And that wasn't required anyway, the berm, correct? Is that right?
No, the berm was already where the hill property was.
It was already there, it wasn't required.
It was already there because that's where the utilities run, and it's like we can't really even do anything with that property because all the utilities is in that berm.
And I know the board's aware, but we don't have a single ordinance that addresses the makeup of outbuildings. It's just the size of outbuildings and the setbacks. I think Mr. Gambone called it a pole barn. I would say this is one of the most nicest pole barns I've ever seen. A pole barn to me is kind of a slanting pole barn. It's rectangular, and so you've complied with everything. You worked off our mistake, and you put it 15 feet too close. If it were moved over, it'd still be exactly like it is now. It'd just be over by the tree instead of 15 feet where it is now. It'd go to the right 15 feet. Any other questions of the applicant?
Clarify again what will be on the building. We're saying it's just going to be on the front part of the building that you'll have what will look like the house.
Yes, ma'am.
The other three sides will not have anything that looks like the house, right? Will the other three sides be, you'll see the metal building, or will it have anything on it?
One side's got hollow.
Just, the back side. The front side,
Will have windows that match their house.
Windows, garage door that matches the house, as well as the wainscoting that goes and runs around the house, the front of the building. The bricks are already at the house. They're actually in front of the house, so we were just waiting. So we have all of the things to make those adjustments. That was in the plans originally.
Mr. Mayor, if I may interject, just to clarify, this is the southern elevation of the building, and where you see that brown metal, that's where they'll have a wainscoting that will match the bricks, and then they'll also have some windows that they bought, 4 windows that match the windows that are in the house that they have, and so wainscoting here. But when we looked at the idea of possibly extending that wainscoting further, the point would be, once you get along the Camptown Lane right-of-way, and I'm standing here in the right-of-way, behind the berm, you wouldn't be able to see the wainscoting, because you can't see the brown part here on the building if you look at this picture, and same thing over here. So it really didn't make much sense to ask them to extend the wainscoting, and then we talked about, could you add maybe some windows or something in the back, and then Mr. Parker at that point brought up the idea of security. So we ended up with, and there's really no issue, in the front, ultimately when everything's completed, but, I'm not sure that extending that wainscot would have done any good on the other sides of the building, and of course, this side of the building's interior to their yard, that's this side, so no one's gonna see the inside of the building except for them. This is a picture from kind of their backyard area. So you're really down to one issue being the northern elevation, and that's why we came up with the concept of the Nellie Stevens Holly, which is a very fast-growing plant and will grow to a wide width and will grow to be 15 to 20 feet high, and so that's where that came from.
Mr. Gambone, this may be an unfair question because you're not prepared to answer, but this is a metal building. It's a large metal building. Any guesstimate on how many of these we have in our entire city of 18,000 homes?
I'm sure you probably have several hundred.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question, I know the mayor keeps talking about the metal building, but it's because of the location of it. I don't have a problem with metal building. I was just trying to make it look more presentable for, like the lady said that lives across the street there. I understand there's 1,000 probably metal buildings.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful or anything, but this day and time, times have changed from years ago, and like I said, I understand personal preference, but it's like this day and time, people are building multiple $100,000 barn dominiums that are metal buildings.
Well,
So, once we're finished and.
Well, the only reason I'm bringing up that is because it is in the right of way. the building department and the city put us in this, the aldermen in this predicament. You know, and we're trying to figure out how to make it right for you and the other citizens, you know. All right, tell me again, what kind of landscaping you gonna do?
Mr. Gambon?
This is in the recommended motion, Alderman Collins, that they would do 7 5-gallon Nellie Stevens holly bushes. They would be evenly spaced, basically 2.5 feet from the end, and then every 5 feet on center along the back of the building. And they would grow in probably, this is what they would look like at the time of planting, over here on the left, and then 3-4 years, this is what
Okay.
they would look like if they're allowed to grow.
All right, what, can they plant something along the berm?
You could add another
That
one.
faces the road?
You could add another one. This end one is going to extend. This will be seen along the berm, but you could certainly, there's already some plantings over here, but you could ask them to add another one over on this side. I suppose they could wrap it around the corner of the building, but I feel pretty confident that it's going to be pretty well screened. Along this side, again, because we felt the wainscoting wasn't going to do any good because you couldn't see it behind the berm. You already have some evergreens here, and then once this tree greens up in the springtime, some of these other trees green up, you probably aren't going to be able to see much of this building. The only reason you can see it at this point is because we're in the dead of winter and there's no foliage on the trees. But yes, you could add to the motion, and you could add another Nellie Stevens holly, or ask them to move one of them along this side. And again, we do have the second recommendation is that they would take at least one of those windows of the 4 that they've already purchased and put it on this side to dress up that side of the building a little bit, something that you could see from that
There's
Camptown
nothing that
lane.
requires him to have that berm, though. If he wanted to just push the berm over, he could just haul the dirt off.
Well, I think he pointed out there's a,
Maybe
if you go
beneficial
out there,
to
yeah,
him.
there's a transformer box and the utilities sit in there. So you could, in theory, take down the berm, but,
Cause it's just dirt work.
yeah, but the utilities are in there, so it would be a little bit difficult to do that. You'd have to move a transformer box down. And I think the berm is good to have, and
I
it's
like the berm.
vegetative, and it helps to screen the building, so, from Camptown Lane, which is that's the area of concern. But again, we were focused on this is the view from Miss Eccles' house, and so, you
It
can
would
see
be
the
kinda
edge of
silly to
pavement.
have a window in the bushes on the side, though. I mean, why have a window there on the side if you were gonna put bushes all up around the window?
Well, you could, like I said, I think, and we'll go back to, back to this slide. The idea, this is the picture that I took facing due south. So this is showing the building from the yard next door. But if you went out, if you could imagine pivoting out here to the road, again, back this direction is where Miss Eccles lives, that this would grow in, and so these bushes would be basically screening this whole corner of the building. So generally with landscaping, you want to put the landscaping at the corners of the building. So I think between that and then the trees and the foliage growing out along this side, which you can see a little bit better in this picture, you're going to have a pretty good screen on the berm. It just happens to be, again, we're in the dead of winter, so you can see the evergreens here that are existing, and then you can see, again, the other trees that you just don't have anything on the leaves right now.
Can I ask y'all a quick question?
Yes, sir.
When y'all started all this and drew it all out and staked it all out, and everything was started, were you a little taken aback when you get something and say, oops, we gotta stop? Or were you surprised that you had a problem after getting this far? You had no idea, did you?
No.
Yeah, but we approved it as a city, and that begs the next question, Mr. Dye. I'm a little bit uncomfortable asking the Parkers to add hollies and bushes and things to
Me
cover
too.
our mistake. Are there any guidelines or any legal authority for the city, if we want these bushes, can the city pay for them? It was our mistake?
Not directly, because it would be a private improvement. But the city could certainly discuss that as a potential claim against the city, but that would be a discussion for another portion of the meeting.
Okay.
But a direct improvement or payment for improvement to private property would not ordinarily be allowed under state law.
Okay, all right, thank you. Any other questions of the applicant? Does the applicant have anything else to add?
Yeah, we just appreciate, well, for me, we just appreciate your time and consideration in this matter.
Again, I apologize for putting you and the neighbors in this situation because we own it, we did it, not
Thank
y'all.
you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions or motions?
The
I'd
only
like to
comments I'll
entertain-
make is, Mr. Parker made a great comment. If this was not a easement issue, we wouldn't be having this discussion. And the comments mostly from the public that are against this are about the size of the building. That's not an issue. It's not even close to the maximum. It may not look right, but it's permissible in our city under our existing ordinances. So that's not an issue for us to even worry about tonight. I know that the neighbors don't like it, and I understand why you don't like it, but we don't have the authority to say you can't put a building up of that size if it meets our ordinances.
Yes, sir. Any other comments from the board?
I would like to make a comment and a motion. I'd first like to thank the neighbors who have come out, who are concerned. Excuse me. I drove through your neighborhood. It's a beautiful neighborhood, and I know you want to keep it that way. There are a lot of accessory buildings in your neighborhood, more than I really realized that, that people had. This has not been a fun decision for us to try to make. In fact, I've gone back and forth with what was really right for the entire neighborhood. But I would like to make the motion to reverse the decision that was made by the Board of Adjustments based on the finding that a hardship exists because of the small size of the unusual rear and side yards of the property compared to the other lots in that neighborhood. This is subject to a screening on the north elevation of the building with the tall evergreens and the landscaping, the windows, all as recommended by the planning department.
Motion before us, if I understand it right, is to reverse the Board of Zoning Adjustments.
Does that include the windows on the side that the staff recommended?
Yeah, I said as windows as staff.
Okay.
So, on the, Ms.
I'll
Hamilton,
second that
the
motion.
motions to reverse the Board of Zoning Adjustments, and on the north side to be screened by the plants mentioned, Nellie Stevens Holly, et cetera, and the windows in place. Is that right?
And for clarity's sake, Alderwoman Hamilton, I believe your motion is similar to the recommended motion by planning staff on page 3 of the staff report.
Yes.
Is
Yes,
that
sir.
correct?
Yes, you
And
can
Mayor,
say
I believe you had a second to the motion.
Second is from
By
Mr.
Alderman
Dickerson. Have a motion from Ms. Hamilton, second from Mr. Dickerson. Any discussion?
I don't think they really have to have any requirements. The city made this mistake, not the applicant. They did everything they were supposed to. I think they ought to be approved. It's just my opinion. I don't think they ought to have to stick anything on them that the city, it wasn't on them in the beginning. That's like asking for 10 points extra in a football game after it's over.
Any other comments?
Well,
Mayor, just- I'm
I got a
sorry.
comment. I'm gonna probably vote for this, but it is, the reason we're trying to do this is because it does affect the whole neighborhood. And so we're trying to somewhat make up a mistake that the city made. Alderman Wallace, you made a good point there. The only reason that we're doing it, I think should do more landscaping is because it does encroach, on the right of way. And maybe it would lessen the impact on the other citizens within the subdivision.
Yeah, but that family was required to meet the setback, and they met what we gave them.
Well, we approved it,
Yes.
and so, but but I agree with Alderman Hamilton in her motion and seconded.
And Mayor, just to clarify, you have a motion to reverse the Board of Adjustment. A yes vote would reverse the Board of Adjustment, which would allow the building to stay where it is, subject to the conditions that were included in the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Dye. Ms. Stewart, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Aldridge,
Yes.
Collins,
Yes.
Dickerson,
Yes.
Hamilton,
Yes.
Henderson,
Yes.
Wallace.
I'm gonna support them getting it approved. Yes.
Motion carries unanimous. It's approved based on presented. Thank you for those who gave us testimony and input. Next business item is, I'm gonna save the staff report on this one, Mr. Gambone. This is for a public hearing on March the 5th for consideration of an appeal from residents within the Quail Hollow subdivision regarding the Board of Zoning Adjustments January the 11th approval of a conditional use permit submitted by Terry Sanders of Turnkey Group on behalf of Patricia Ann Humphreys and Keith Sellers, property owners. Actually, this should read from a request from me as the mayor that the board consider appealing that decision. What took place in the Board of Zoning Adjustment meeting was an applicant came forward with this 7.38 plus or minus acres in an AR area and asked for it to be zoned to where, as a conditional use permit, to where that it could be an event venue. A number of residents turned out and opposed that, although it was voted and approved that it could be an event venue under a conditional use permit. The applicant the very next day sent notification to me and the city asking for it not to be approved because he was not going forward based on the opposition. So instead of the citizens having to come before the board and ask for it to be repealed or denied, then I don't think they should have to do that. The applicants came forward and says he don't want that zoning for conditional use, and therefore he's not going to go forward. So we still have to have a public hearing on March the 5th, but it's, at this point, the applicant's not going to be here to ask for it to remain as conditional use. Residents may be here, anybody may be here to speak for or against it, but I think it's the right thing to do is go ahead and rescind that and take that conditional use permit away based on the amount of opposition. There was a little bit of a jurisdictional question involved in it, and also based on the person that asked for it says he's not going to buy the property and not going to do that, so he don't need a conditional use permit. So that'll be taken up on March the 5th. Anything to add, Mr. Dye?
No, sir, other than this item is just to set the hearing, and I recommend that the board not engage in a discussion of the merits or lack of merits for the application because we haven't set the hearing for tonight, so we really have a due process issue from that standpoint. So my recommendation would be to set the hearing for the March 5th date and to have a discussion of the merits on that night.
Thank you. So recommended motion would be to set this for public hearing on March the 5th, if the board so chooses.
So moved.
Mr. Dickerson, motion. Second, Mr. Wallace. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries for a March the 5th public hearing. Old business is consideration of bids opened on January the 29th, 2024 for police uniforms and equipment for the City of Olive Branch Police Department. You have the bid amounts, or you have on the back side of your document. Ironically enough, only one bidder chose to bid. The others decided not to bid. I believe, Chief Cox, this is the same company that's currently providing uniforms, and this would extend that contract, right? Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board on these items broken out? Animal control, crossing guards, these are just different uniforms, but all bid by the same company, which is Mid-South Solutions.
So moved.
Mr. Collins, motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Henderson, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. New business, consideration of adoption of an ordinance prohibiting nuisance level gatherings. This is a little bit of legal lingo, I guess, for party houses. You know, we've had a few instances where people have called my office and may have called y'all, and there may be a party's taking place, an Airbnb, short-term rental, and maybe half the people there don't know the other half of the people. a message goes out on social media, come forward, bring your $20 and come to the house, et cetera. And our citizens are concerned about that, especially ones that live next door. I know of only 2 instances that it happened, but we were trying to get ahead of this to make it to where the police department could do their job, because right now, we don't have a ordinance against a nuisance level gathering, and the ordinance spells out very well, Mr. Dye did, as far as what creates a nuisance level conduct. It's not just a gathering of people, but you'll see those items on page 2, under number 2. Noise that would be a violation of the city noise ordinance, obstruction of a street or public right-of-way, including a sidewalk, public intoxication or drinking in public, the service of alcohol beverages to minors, possession and or consumption of alcohol by minors, assault, battery, fights, domestic violence, and other disturbances of the peace, the sale or service of alcoholic beverages without a required city license, vandalism or destruction of property, littering, urinating or defecating in public, or trespassing. Mr. Dye, anything to add?
No, sir. Obviously, nothing to that list, add to the list. You recited those items correctly, and obviously all of those items are activities for which there is already a local ordinance or state law to address that conduct. So it begs the question, why the ordinance? The ordinance would also allow a citation or a summons to court for the owner of the property, to the extent that the owner was allowing that property to be used for the purposes that are listed. So you have ordinances already that address littering or vandalism or alcohol consumption by minors. This would also allow the ordinance to reach to the owner of the property if that was in the judgment of the enforcing officer that needed to be done. It's a mechanism to bring that owner into municipal court to answer for the party.
So this ordinance would require the officer answering the call to make a determination whether he thinks the owner should be cited?
I think that, well, I think the short answer is yes. I think that the background to this, and Mayor, this goes to, I think, your initial comments and maybe your concerns here. There are some houses in certain jurisdictions that have been used for this type of
Yes.
party and are marketed for that purpose,
Yes.
to where the owner has an understanding and is intending the property to be used for these purposes. And I think it would be within the judgment and discretion of the enforcing officers to determine whether the owner had that knowledge or did not have that knowledge, and should the owner be included in the group that summons to municipal court.
I just find it hard for the officer that shows up on the scene to know that the owner really did know, that the owner had advertised it for that purpose. I don't know how an officer would ever know that ahead of time.
I don't think that they would, and Chief Cox is here. Chief Cox, correct me if I'm wrong, but with this not being, in some jurisdictions, South Haven, for instance, has this mirror ordinance, but their ordinance is set up for the enforcing or the responding officer to issue a citation. And that's typically not the way that we do code enforcement activities, whether enforced by code enforcement staff or the police. What we do is issue a summons to municipal court. That summons would not be issued until there was a report made by the responding officer, consultation with the prosecutor, and a determination made by the PD that a summons should issue.
Okay.
So the officer on the scene at midnight on a Friday night would not even have the ability to issue a summons to begin with.
Okay.
Because the court would not be available to him. And so he would report back on Monday, Tuesday, when you have you, with the facts in his report, and with the recommendation of the prosecutor, have a summons issued,
Okay.
compelling the appropriate parties to court.
Yeah, I just didn't want that responsibility to fall to the
That's right.
officer that's, answering a call to say, oh, well, I need to go ahead and issue a summons here to the owner, because he may or may not have known what's going on.
I think it would eventually fall to the PD to make that determination, but they would do so not in the heat of the moment. It
Right.
would be after later
Okay.
review and consultation with the prosecutor.
Okay.
And that would allow, I know Chief Cox and I had this conversation this afternoon, and Alderwoman Hamilton we had it as well. That would allow somebody that's renting a house that lives out of state to not be taken in. It'd be investigated, and a summons would be issued if they knew about it. So Chief Cox talked about not necessarily a warning system, but if they notify that property owner one time, and now here we go again next weekend with another party, then that's different. Then therefore they knew about it because the police notified them.
Okay.
And this is completely by illegal activity and not by
It's not by
freedom to
quantity or
assemble.
number, no.
or freedom to assemble.
Right.
That's right.
It's not by number at all, quantity of people. And I would hope, and I know that our responding officers are smart enough to differentiate between a family reunion or Super Bowl party gathering versus a nuisance party that most of us are probably driven by at some point in time and kind of know what's going on. Streets shut down in a neighborhood, traffic blocked, that's the kind of things this is trying to prevent.
And we revised it to try to make it past that, Alderman Wallace, to address that constitutional question that I think you're getting at, is that in other jurisdictions, you see these ordinances referred to as a loud and unruly party ordinance. And there are areas or court decisions in the state of Mississippi where those types of terms, particularly in the context of noise ordinances, where those ordinances have been ruled vague and unconstitutionally vague. And so what we did was we revised it to reference nuisance level gatherings, which are defined by activities that are already a violation of pre-existing law. And a municipality has authority under the general police power statutes in the Mississippi Code to prevent and abate nuisances. So it's tied back to an anchor in the law rather than a subjective feeling that a party might be too loud or unruly. Those are vague and subjective.
Those would be clear.
Any staff input or any questions from the board?
I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance as presented.
Motion to approve made by Mr. Dickerson. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Aldridge. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Y'all are off the party list. You're not gonna be invited, nor would I, nor would Mr. Dye. But I did learn what a Nellie Stevens holly was tonight. I know y'all probably knew that, but I wasn't familiar with that type of shrub, but now I know. All right, continuing down the docket, consideration of recommendation to approve final change order number 2 on the contract with Ensor LLC in the amount of $9,818.58, increasing the contract amount from $1,552,248.64 to $1,562,067.22, and make the final payment in the amount of $68,301.56, and accept the project as complete for the project referred to as the Woodland Lake Outlet Structure. Anything to add, Mr. Swims?
These are just minor adjustments in our final quantities for the riprap, the box culvert, the weir structure that was put around to maintain the lake elevation. All the work was looked at and was approved, so we're satisfied with it. And so the overall increase is about 0.6%, so it's a very small increase to the overall contract price. So we recommend that we make that approval.
Mr. Swims, was this an 80-20 grant? I'm trying to recall.
Well, it was,
This was in the legislature, the legislative.
yeah,
Okay.
grant funding.
All right, very good.
Applied to it.
A few years back, the legislature approved. Okay.
A portion of the cost.
Okay.
That's right.
Does the board have any questions on this?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Alderman at Large Collins. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Henderson. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item 3, consideration of adoption of a resolution of the Mayor and Board of Aldermen of the City of Olive Branch, Mississippi, authorizing the issuance of a general obligation bond of the city in one or more series in a total aggregate principal amount of not to exceed $17,600,000, $17.6 million, as described in the resolution, to raise money for the purpose of providing capital projects as described in the resolution, directing the preparation, execution, and delivery thereof, authorizing the sale of said bond in one or more series to the Mississippi Development Bank, and the sale of the not to exceed $17.6 million Mississippi Development Bank Special Obligation Bonds, Series 2024, City of Olive Branch, Mississippi Public Improvement General Obligation Bond Project in one or more series and for related purposes. Mr. Dye?
Yes. I'd like to introduce to the board Elizabeth Clark. Elizabeth, you can come forward, please. Elizabeth is our new bond counsel. She is with Butler Snow, and has provided invaluable service already to us on the bond issue that the city is working on. Just a little bit of background about these bonds and the structure of them, and then I'll let Elizabeth address any other questions that y'all may have. But the board, of course, is aware that we were going to issue bonds to be paid by water and sewer funds for the water and sewer extensions into the annexation areas. And then there was also a discussion of the issuance of bonds to be paid for with gas revenues to go towards a new public works facility. And Elizabeth recommended combining those into one resolution, and then you could issue bonds in incremental amounts and for various purposes and for, to be paid for from various sources of revenue in order to pay those bonds back, and it just increased efficiency to do all that in one bond resolution. So we appreciate Elizabeth's advice on that, and this is that bond issue. Probably, Mr. May, I think estimates that we'll probably wind up issuing less than 17.6 million, but we do have, if this is approved, authority to issue up to that amount as interest rates and the project cost justify. So with that, Elizabeth, I'll turn it over to you. You can explain a little bit more about the Mississippi Development Bank process for the board's information.
Yeah, so obviously nice to meet everyone tonight, and thank you for allowing our firm to have the opportunity to work with y'all on this particular bond issue. So back in December of, I think it was December 19th, y'all adopted an intent resolution for a not to exceed 17.6 million general obligation bonds. Per state law, we had to set a no protest date for anyone to show up and file any written protest to the issuance of these bonds. We have confirmed with Tina, your city clerk, that no one filed any objections. So now we are in a place where we can move forward with the next step, which is this resolution. We do have in here, as Brian said, a not to exceed amount of 17.6 million. That's just the total maximal amount that the city can issue. Obviously, once we get past this procedural process and we start to get into the timing of when we want to actually do the projects, we'll work with Jason, your city clerk, and Brian to nail down exactly what that amount will be, which, as Brian said, will likely be less than that 17.6 million. The avenue that we have, that we're going through with the city, is through what we call the Mississippi Development Bank, which is an entity that was created by state law. This allows and gives the city a lot more flexibility when actually issuing bonds. So the city statutes have where you have to competitively bid, you have certain debt service schedule prohibitions that you can or can't do, and when you actually go through the development bank, you kind of can go away with some of those and actually fit the project in the way that the city wants to amortize its debt. And you can also negotiate with an underwriter, which is the city has selected Raymond James, to actually go into the market and sell those bonds on any given date, not just having to pick one for a competitive sale. And so the development bank allows you to structure it a little differently. They do require 2 board meetings, which we will have some of your city officials at the February 14th meeting. Once we've gone through both of this meeting and the Mississippi Development Bank meeting, we'll be in a position to start moving forward when you guys are ready to actually sell the bonds. So that's kind of an overview of the Mississippi Development Bank and the process, but I'm happy to answer any questions. The resolution tonight just affirms that there was no written protest filed, also approves the form of documents that will be necessary when we actually go into the market to sell the bonds, and approves the sale of the general obligation bond in one or more series not to exceed 17.6 million.
Thank you. Any questions from Ms. Clark? For Ms. Clark, rather. Clark, right? Any questions? Any motions?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Mr. Wallace, motion to approve. Is there a second? Second, Ms. Hamilton. Any more discussion?
The only thing I'd ask is, when we issue these, we're allowing resolution of 17,600,000. What's the length for all that?
The length of the term?
So
How long-
we,
You mean how long we're financing them for?
No,
No?
if we're okay in 17.6 million, is that perpetual forever?
oh,
No, you've got a window. I'll
Or do
let
we have
Elizabeth
to
answer.
issue bonds within a year or 2 years?
correct. So from today's date, which is the no protest date, you have 2 years to issue up to the not to exceed amount. So you've got the 2 years from this date.
Yeah.
Good question. Any other questions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Clark.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Item number 4 is consideration to approve a professional services agreement with sports facilities companies. Just in a quick summary, the less than 3 years, I guess, that I've been here, we got some gorgeous parks, we got to do some great things, but people that love, residents that love soccer, what do they want? More soccer fields. Residents that have small kids, they want a splash pad. Residents that love baseball, they want more baseball fields. You know, this would give us a path forward to what we should actually be doing. The Sports Facilities Group, they have been involved in over 3,000 active sports complex projects. They manage 50 of them across the United States. They are the holy grail, so to speak. You see the feasibility report that's attached. They come in, they do a study, they look at things such as they survey our residents to see what they are interested in. They look at our existing park and to see, should we keep some things, should we alter some things? What do we do with the 37 acres that the city purchased years ago at Church Road and Highway 305? What would fit there? And they look, if you look on page, in the appendix rather, the feasibility report, they look at the demographics, socioeconomic analysis, sports in the region. It would be fruitless for us to try to compete with some sports when other cities have almost mastered it, so we probably wouldn't go down that path of that sport. If there's within a couple hours drive time, if there's more than the market needs, they probably wouldn't recommend that to us. They'd look at tourism industry insights, recommend a facility and program, model overview, performance overview, impact analysis, cost and return. They have an option. We don't have to use them. We could use them from start to finish to oversee the construction, but we're not required to do that. We had a couple of Skype calls or Skype meetings. The last one, Alderman Collins was at the meeting, Alderwoman Hamilton was at the meeting, and Alderman Earhart was at the meeting. COO Andra, a couple other players from the city were there, interested in it. They seem to have done a really good job. We followed up after that call with a call with Mayor Spurl, Mayor of Starkville, who uses this company. They built their parks down there, their baseball parks. They operated concessions all the way through. We're not required to do that. That'd just be a decision if we want to do that or not. But they're kind of the premier in the United States as far as recommending sports facilities and designing and going forward with those and helping market them once we make a decision, once the board makes a decision, and they have a network of investors that will help. It's an option to invest in or not. Not that we have to use them. The one that stands out the most that they built, analyzed, did all the work on and run it today is the baseball complex at Hoover, Alabama, that the SEC championship tournament's played in every year. They built that, they run it day to day, and it's just quite a nice complex, it really is. So this would be, in my opinion, equivalent to an engineering study that we would approve engineering to do for our roadways and infrastructure, and it would give us a roadmap going forward. Director Campbell's here at Parks and Recs. I may be off on the date, but I believe our plan that was recommended is probably a decade old, maybe at least a decade old. Our plan is that, you know, for our fields, and a lot have changed in 10 years in the sporting arena, and this would give us some direction forward and some business facts to help support that direction forward. But Ms. Hamilton, Mr. Collins, y'all were at that last meeting. Anything to add?
It's real informative. Like what you said.
Right. I think it made so much sense to get a plan and then work out the plan as we can financially, whatever. But from what I understand, they would help us put priorities in place, which I think is very important before we start spending any money. It's very impressive.
and it's not a 6-month, 90-day project. This is a 2.5 to 3 year project. It has to track out the different phases, and from what I've seen, that they certainly do it right. Mr. Andre, anything else to add? You were involved in this. Okay. And it's board's decision, but the thought is that we'd use the monies for this amount from the 1% hotel motel tax. That's what the people voted for. Not a dollar's been spent out of the hotel motel tax account, right, Mr. May? We haven't spent that money.
We have spent some.
You've been spending.
Yeah.
I would.
On the design of phase 2 of the soccer.
Okay.
We've had a few invoices on that.
Okay.
And then we've had a few invoices on the multi-purpose trail that's proposed in the soccer.
Okay. All right, well, my correction then. What's been spent has 100% been on parks, just like this would be. The money's there, and it would be a good roadmap forward for us, I think. I do believe it would be.
At the end of this, they'll come back and say what the cost for them to do it.
Right.
And then if we wanted them to do it and handle it, they would come up with several different
Like
price
their
ranges
management fees that they would oversee.
and recommendations.
Yep. And this report, the board has a report that's maybe, 30 pages long that shows from start to finish. They've redacted the city's name, but it probably wouldn't take a detective to find out what city they're talking about as you see the facts and the size of these cities.
And anything we wanted to implement is, say we used them, we could set parameters that we felt.
Yep, and we're certainly not locked into using them by any means. I know they have Starkville. I want to say, what was the baseball? Was it Brandon? Mr. Collins, that you, Brandon and Starkville?
Well, this is a very similar concept we used with our road improvement, where we were all saying, okay, I've got this bad street in my ward, I've got this bad street, I need to get this done. So we went with a professional group to tell us exactly what we needed to do, how it would save us money, what would be the benefit long-term. So this is basically what we're doing with our parks, is using the exact same concept.
That's right. Letting the experts do the analysis and come to us with the roadmap.
Yeah, I've been to the Brandon Park, and they recommended that. And some of the things they put in the last few years, pickleball and splash pads, and they manage all their softball and baseball fields. And I don't know after that, but they have improved all that at Brandon.
So, question before the board would be, if the board is in agreement to approve the city to go forward on this contract with them for the services agreement to provide this document, and you can see it broken out in different phases. The payments would be broken out after each schedule of work was completed.
Is it what, 63,000?
63,500 is the total.
Initial one?
No, that's total.
Total.
It's in three different phases. First phase is 31,750. The second phase is 19,050, and the third phase is $12,700. That shows the different deliverables on each of those steps.
I make a motion to hire them.
Motion made by Alderman at Large Collins to agree to this feasibility study, 63.5. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Alderwoman Hamilton. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to leave regular session with the intentions of going into executive session to discuss items 1 through 8?
So moved.
Mr. Collins, motion. Is there a second? Second, Ms. Aldridge. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter in the administration department, personnel matters in the ambulance department, personnel matter in the engineering department, personnel matter in the fire department, personnel matters in the police department, personnel matter in the utility billing department, personnel matter in the water maintenance department, and discussion with city attorney pursuant to Mississippi Code annotated section 2541-7 4B. Is there a motion to go in executive session to discuss those items? Ms. Henderson, motion. Is there a second? Second, Mr. Collins, all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Attorneys to stay. Yep. We want our attorneys to stay with us.